To promote my new flower shop, I had one place print my business cards, another print my brochures, and a third, my signs. Now my roses aren't red, my violets aren't blue, my geraniums look dead, and I don't know what to do.
Staples can help your business stand out with signs, banners, and brochures that are a true reflection of your company. And now at Staples, spend $50 or more on print and marketing services and get $5 off your next in-store purchase.
Now my business is blossoming, and I'm spending less green.
Exclusions apply. In-store only. Ends 6/23/18.
Blog Talk Radio.
And welcome to today's edition of The Cheapest Meal presented by Deep Fried Draft. My name is Brian Bosarge. Got a great show ahead of you today. We're going to speak to the creator of Fanspeak, everybody's favorite mock draft simulator, Steve Shoup. I'm going to talk to him about Fanspeak. We're going to talk to him about the Redskins and a little bit more. Everybody who listened to last week's show, thank you. We had a great guest, Jeff Risden from the managing editor of Lions Wire and Browns Wire on the USA Today, host of networks. So without further ado, let's bring in our guest now. He is the man behind Fanspeak, the mock draft simulator everybody uses during the draft season, and an expert on DC sports. My guest today, Steve Shoup. Steve, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Brian. Thanks for having me on the show.
Hey, man, always great seeing you down here at Mobile during Senior Bowl week. Always end up sitting by you in the press box, which is always fun. And so how have you been since I last saw you there?
Well, doing well. Obviously, the draft season was extremely busy. We keep growing and growing and keep trying to provide a good product for draft fans out there and NFL fans out there to simulate the draft and get an idea of who might be around when, and also just get people familiar with later round draft prospects. I mean, everyone talks about the first round or the top 50, but, we provide 300 player lists. I know you do one every year or the last couple of years, and we really appreciate that. And we love having all these different voices out there that people can see their top 300 big boards and, get them familiar with 300-400 players, because not everyone, of course, has the same top 300. So that really helps. I think that helps, educate fans and get people excited for, some of these later round guys and undrafted guys that now maybe they're a little bit more familiar with.
Yeah, I enjoy submitting my top 300 to Fanspeak. It gets a lot of exposure for my website, because people see that and then they go and look at my, everything else that I do. But just give me a little background on how Fanspeak got started there with the simulator.
So we had started Fanspeak a couple years prior we launched the simulator in 2014, and I started going down to the Senior Bowl in 2012, and that started driving traffic, gained more recognition, and meeting all the guys who were down there and interviewing the players, and it's just such a great experience for anyone in media who gets a chance to go down there, and I know you'll agree with that. And but I come to find everyone loves their mock drafts, and while they're not necessarily the most predictable tool, I do think they offer a lot of information for fans. The problem being is if you try and do a mock draft longer than even the first round, people will say, well, player X will never be there in the second round. I remember I had a Packer fan tell me there was no way the Packers will get Eddie Lacy in the second round because he'll be long gone. Well, they ended up getting Eddie Lacy in the second round. And, so I just thought there has to be some way where we can do this and create plausible scenarios for fans and media to use and to post their mock drafts where they can, have plausible scenarios of who the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth through the seventh round picks will be. And yeah, so it came up with this idea, and I worked with our developer and just kind of ran with it from there.
I'll tell you what it is for me and other people like me. I know it's a great content creator during the months of February before the draft, because you go in, you can do a simulation of each team's mock draft that you want to do, and you have a whole piece you can write about, mock drafts and such. But I want us to change it up a little bit. I know you're big into the Redskins, being from the D.C. area there. So I want to talk to you about them a little bit, because I haven't really talked to anybody about Washington since the draft. But I got to find out about this Alabama obsession that Washington seemingly has had the last couple of years. We know why Ozzie Newsome with Baltimore. He went to Bama, got that connection. But this year they drafted Ron Payne in the first round, come back with Sean Dion Hamilton in the sixth. Who is it in the front office of Washington that is piped into Nick Saban?
People have wondered who exactly the connection is. I think there's a lot of connection. I think, Doug Williams has always had a strong presence in the South. He's gotten elevated with Scott McLuhan being pushed out in D.C., and just some of the other guys in the scouting staff. I think a lot of it is the one thing the Redskins had for the longest time is they had a serious culture issue where they'd sign these big, high-priced free agents, and they just wouldn't mesh together, and they had no concept of playing as a team and winning. And, we can say a lot about, great prospects around the league, but the one thing they can't say is, unless they're from Bama, is that they win, at a consistent basis. And, players go to Alabama, and if they're there 4 years, they're probably in the national championship game for 3 of them. That's just nuts. So I think the Redskins wanted a culture shift. I think they wanted, obviously, the level of competition of the SEC. It's the best of the best. They're the highly recruited guys. And, every guy who gets recruited to Alabama, not only is he a 5-star guy, but he's competing with other 4- and 5-star guys on his team for his starting job. And he can never look back. Nothing's taken for granted at Alabama and some of these other SEC schools. So I think that's a conscious decision. Then Alabama, they win. So you add that winning culture. So I think that's the big thing, that now 2 straight years, last year's Jonathan Allen and Ryan Anderson. This year, like you said, it's Deron Payne and Sean Dion Hamilton. Like they're really like that Alabama connection. And, I don't know if it'll be a first-rounder every year, but I wouldn't be surprised to see an Alabama player drafted most years by the Redskins for the foreseeable future.
Well, as long as Nick Saban's coaching at Bama, you can guarantee they're going to have multiple first-round picks there, because, like you said, it's just every year they're in top. If they're not the top-rated recruiting class, they're in the top 5, and it's amazing how he gets all that talent there. But let's move on there. We talked about Deron Payne there and Sean Dion Hamilton. Second round, Darius Geis. Seemingly it's a steal. Everybody mocked him in the first round. Probably should have been a first-round pick based on his talent alone, but had some off-the-field issues that teams knocked him for. What is a realistic, from a Redskins perspective and a fantasy perspective, we can expect from Darius Geis in 2018?
Well, I really think from a fantasy perspective, and this is obviously also a Redskins perspective, I think Darius Geis could be this year's Kareem Hunt. And, obviously you have the connection now of Alex Smith coming over, so he's going to go to a situation with a quality quarterback. The Redskins have a good offensive line, assuming they can stay healthy. That's one thing they were not able to do last year. Their offensive line was extremely banged up. Morgan Moses, the right tackle, was the only player to play in all 16 games, and even he had to miss a half here or a quarter there due to bumps and bruises. But I really look at Darius Geis as a similar thing. Kareem Hunt was not the top running back selected. I think he was like the 6th running back selected in his draft class, and he just ran away with it. And obviously there was an injury in front of him in camp. I think Geis has that starting role a little bit more firm right now, and Chris Thompson will handle the passing work, but Kareem Hunt had to share a lot of the third down duties with Charkandrick West last year. And if you look at his snap count, he was only on the field about a little over 60% of the time, and I would expect Geis to be at a similar rate. So I think Geis could actually end up being the top fantasy running back this year. I mean, obviously it depends from a PPR perspective. You might get somebody, his catches will probably be capped somewhat, but probably total yardage, total touchdowns, he'll lead in those departments. Catches, might put him at a little bit disadvantage. I'd probably only expect like 30 to 40 catches tops with Chris Thompson, as long as Chris Thompson can remain healthy. But, I think the Redskins have looked at it. The last 3 years they've been a competitive team. They went to the playoffs one year. They've been competitive the other 2 years. Last year they were really competitive until about week 11, and then injuries just really started to pile up. I mean, they were on their third string offensive lineman at two positions for the last couple games of the year. They were on their fourth or fifth string running back. They had their fourth and fifth string inside linebackers playing. So it was just a mess down the stretch for the Redskins. So I think they look at it that the one thing we've lacked is a running game these last couple of years. We can get that if we actually stay healthy. It's a competitive division, but we think we can remain competitive with getting the veteran Alex Smith to replace Cousins.
You mentioned offensive line and their third-round pick, Jerron Christian from Louisville. Guy I wasn't very high on. I had him like a fifth, sixth-round grade. Goes in the third round here at pick 74. I watched enough Louisville games because of Lamar Jackson, and you can't help but notice he's running for his life a lot. And Jerron Christian was one of the reasons he had to run for his life. What do you think about that third-round pick?
I thought it was a little high. I kind of had him as like a fourth-round guy, kind of in that 100 to 125 range. I thought he's a raw tackle prospect, and I think the Redskins see him the same way. I don't think this was a pick for this year. I think, I think they're looking from a long-term depth standpoint because Ty Nsekhe, who's been an admirable swing tackle for him these last couple of years, he's going to be a free agent after this year, and he's in his 30s already. He got a later start to his NFL career, so I don't think they want to invest money in him beyond this year. And then the other thing I think they look at long-term is Trent Williams. He was drafted in 2010, and we just saw, Joe Thomas, who had never been injured before last year, retire, kind of out of the blue. And a lot of these offensive tackles, because they are making such good money now, they're having 9, 10, 11-year careers, no longer the Jackie Slater 20-year careers in the NFL. And, I think they look at it that Trent Williams has had a lot of injuries throughout his career. While he's one of the best tackles in the game right now, maybe 2-3 years from now, he might decide just to hang him up. So I think they look at it from a long-term perspective. This is a guy we hope we can mold and develop, but I think he's a project. I actually wouldn't be surprised, and this is kind of why I was against taking him in the top 3 rounds, is I don't even know if he'll be active on game days most weeks, just because I think he's so raw that I don't think you can count on him to come in an injury situation in the middle of a game. So I thought it was a bit of a reach, but I do see some upside with him. I mean, from his physical standpoint and athletic standpoint, there is some upside there, but I did think it was a bit of a reach pick and probably not a guy who's going to contribute much to them as a rookie, which you typically want some contribution from a third-rounder.
All right, last question on their 2018 draft. Who was your favorite day 3 pick?
I actually really liked what they did on day 3. And I could honestly, I was very happy with every day 3 pick, so I think you can make a case for all of them. But I have to go with Tim Settle, 5th-round pick, Virginia Tech. He's a guy who a lot of people were saying, some were saying 2nd round, but a lot of people were definitely saying 3rd, 4th round. And he's a run plugger, and that's what they need. And, a guy like Payne, who they take in the 1st round, he can play the 5 technique. So you could have a, early down situation where it's Payne at 1-5 tech spot, Jonathan Allen at the other 5 tech spot, and Tim Settle in the middle. And then when it's more of a passing down situation, you bring in Matt Ioannidis, who really showed up last year, and move Payne back into the nose tackle. So I really like Settle. I don't think he's ever going to be like a 50-60% player or more, but I think he's going to be a really good run defender and a a guy who contributes for those 15, 20 snaps a game.
Yeah, I agree there. Also, like a couple of the undrafted guys they brought in, Quinn Blanding, Simi Cobbs. I thought those were two good signings that could make an impact, perhaps.
Yeah, no, again, I really thought I was really happy with some of these, day 3 guys, and like you said, some of those undrafted guys. I mean, I think, and a couple guys like Martise Carter, the running back, he's probably a practice squad guy, but, there's some long-term depth options behind Darius guys, or a Danny Johnson corner who's going to compete with their 7th rounder Greg Strauman for a spot. I thought those were some good later round picks or undrafted guys as well.
All right, let's go back to the draft a couple of years ago, and Josh Dotson is a guy I wanted the Bengals to draft. A couple picks, the Redskins get him a couple picks before the Bengals do, but he hasn't done jack in 2 years. Is this the year he breaks out?
I think it is. I think his first year he got injured late in camp, tried to play through it, was not good, and they shut him down after, 4 or 5 weeks, whatever the case was. And so, last year was kind of like his rookie year. And the thing we got to remember, outside of the crazy 2014 draft of, Odell Beckham, Mike Evans, Brandon Cooks, all those guys, receivers do not produce early. They just don't. You look at, since that draft, look at the first-round receivers. I mean, outside of Amari Cooper, it's been bad. And you look at the year that Dotson was drafted. You look at the other first-rounders. I mean, Corey Coleman's done absolutely nothing. Laquan Treadwell can't get on the field. Will Fuller has kind of had a similar career where he's had some splash plays, some big catches, but not consistent. Also, he's had some injuries, not as much as Dotson. And even like second and third rounders, I mean, you might find one guy who's really produced in that time frame, but it takes receivers 3 years for whatever reason, outside of that like 2014 class, or those can't miss receivers of like the Calvin Johnsons or Larry Fitzgeralds. You really don't see receivers produce in their first year or two. And this even goes for like some better players, like a Roddy White. His first year, I don't think he was that productive. He was a late first rounder when he was drafted, and others. I mean, again, there are exceptions like A.J. Green and whatnot, but it's pretty consistent that we don't see receivers produce early in their careers, and the injury didn't help. But I think Dotson, now it is on him. He's got to produce. He's got to put up or shut up at this point, and I think he could. He definitely showed some flashes, and whether he has a better connection with Alex Smith or not, we'll see. But it's got to be his year, because Crowder's their slot guy, and he'll be consistent in that role, and Jordan Reed and Vernon Davis will, put up good tight end production for as long as Reed is healthy. And they, brought in Paul Richardson for another deep threat, but they really need Dotson to step up and be that number one guy. And I think, I wouldn't necessarily go out and say he's going to be a fantasy stud, a 1,300-yard receiver, 10 touchdowns, but I could see him cracking 1,000 this year and putting up decent touchdown numbers.
Last question on the Redskins. Is Jay Gruden on the hot seat?
I don't think he is, just because, for a couple of reasons. I think, they gave him an extension, not just because of that a couple of years ago, because Dan Snyder's always shown he's willing to fire, but the Redskins have shown a lot of positive stuff these last 3 years, and has it all come together? No. But considering what they've been through in the last 15, 20 years, these last 3 years are much more positive. I think a lot will depend on Alex Smith. If Alex Smith plays somewhat like he did last year and the Redskins are competitive, then I think he's fine, even if they were to miss the playoffs. But if they're 7-9 with a couple of tough losses, I think he's fine. If they're 8-8, miss the playoffs, or 9-7, miss the playoffs, I think he's fine. If they go 3-13, yeah, he's in trouble. Especially if Alex Smith falters, because they decided to invest heavily in Alex Smith with trading away Kendall Fuller in a pick for him and gave him a nice big contract. So that would would definitely blow up in Gruden's face. So if he falters and they're just have a terrible record, then he probably gets fired. But I feel like as long as they're competitive, even if they miss the playoffs, he gets one more year. And, of course, if he makes the playoffs, he's definitely fine.
All right, a couple more questions and we'll end this. But I'm always curious, and we spoke briefly, on Twitter about, you weren't that far along in the process for 19 yet. I've got a list, but I haven't really started breaking down. I'm just curious, I always like to find out how everybody else's processes are. But what is your process for, evaluating these guys?
For going forward for next year?
Yeah.
Well, I always look at it from a perspective of when I'm watching for the current draft year, I always note guys. And, of course, you see, especially, for bigger schools, I definitely find myself leaning to the Alabama guys and the Georgia guys and stuff like that because I watched a lot of them already for the previous draft class. And, the guys who are obviously standouts. And so I've already noted those guys as I watch. I mean, I necessarily wasn't watching them super close to get ready for 2018, but I've noted those guys. And then, of course, the big names. You had Oliver's, Bosa. I mean, those guys just stand out, whether you watched a lot of Houston or whether you're watching a lot of, whatever school it may be. So, there I try and break it down, look at who's draft eligible, of course, focus on I typically, obviously I'm focusing on all upcoming seniors. I really focus on redshirt juniors because those guys are in their 4 years. They're more likely to declare than true juniors or redshirt sophomores. Sometimes unless it's if it's a redshirt, if it's a true junior who's started the first 2 years or played a significant amount the first 2 years, then I'll consider them, of course, much more likely to come out. So I kind of break it down into those tiers and start watching what I can from their previous seasons. Some of it is just recapping because, like I said, I've already noted some of the bigger names, especially from the bigger schools, and just getting a better feel for them. Because that's the one thing I like to get a little bit of a basis on, say, the top 100, top 150 guys that I kind of have a feeling for right now, and it's definitely going to change. There's no doubt about that. But I want to get a feel for what they are now and from what I'm going to see from them going forward, because one thing I like is to see growth in players, like when a guy regresses or a guy doesn't get really any better, that's obviously a concern for me. Even if he played at a high level as, say, a junior, then a senior year, he's still at a good level but didn't increase or maybe took a slight step back. Is he still draftable? Sure, but I maybe no longer consider him a top 50 guy or a top 75 guy. So I try and get a basis for those top 150, 200 guys over the course of the summer to get ready for the season. And, I've definitely noted other guys and guys who just seem draftable from their accolades, their starting time, their size, what I've noted on obviously the packed teams from the big programs, and just kind of try and work it from there and keep massaging the list and growing the list as the college football season kicks off and gets in through the early months, and then you start looking for those breakout players, that guy who didn't play his first 2 or 3 years and now is having a great year, and you're like, oh, well, this guy might come out, or he's a senior and he's finally gotten a shot, and I really need to start watching this guy. So, it's a process, as coming up with these lists and really evaluating players, but it's definitely a labor of love, but it's fun, and as you know that too. It's fun to watch football, talk football, and just see these guys grow and become, NFL players.
Yeah, it is. It is fun. You talked about regressing. I didn't learn my lesson last year. I fell in love with Tarvaris McFadden, the corner from Florida State, and then he completely just, fell off the cliff this year, but I ignored it and, ended up getting burned by that. So, but last question, I met you a few years ago at the Senior Bowl. We talked about that earlier. So everybody that comes down here, I always try to ask them, what's your favorite place to eat when you come here to Mobile? Because I live here in Mobile, for people listening that don't know. So I'm always curious to find out what people think.
I've tried some local places. I can't even remember the names. Wenzel's is good. There's a couple of other places that I've really liked when I've been down there, but I can't remember the names specifically. But a lot of good food, that's for sure.
Yeah, I hear that. When a lot of people come down here. I always try to introduce people to places that I like, and stuff of that nature. But Steve, tell everybody where we can find your work.
Well, you can follow me on Twitter at Steve-O Speak, STEVEO SPEAK. Also, the @Fanspeak account. Somebody else monitors that, but of course, I'm always checking in on that. And then, our site is fanspeak.com, and our main tool is the on-the-clock mock draft simulator. It's a lot of fun. We have other tools, and we're also continuing to grow the simulator to have more, hopefully a more interactive experience, a more informational experience this season. So look for some upgrades as the season kicks off and throughout the fall.
Can't wait to see it. Steve, I can't thank you enough for joining me today.
Oh, absolutely. My pleasure, Brian.
All right. Thanks a lot. That was Steve Shoup, the honcho over at Fanspeak, the mock draft simulator. Everybody. If you are a fan of the draft, if you're a fan of your team's draft, if you are in draft media, if you're in NFL media, everybody uses Fanspeak to simulate, to see how the draft outcomes. Everybody. All your main players submit their top 300 lists to Fanspeak. Your Matt Miller at Bleacher Report, others that your other major, Dane Brugler from CBS, I guess it's no longer NDT Scouting, but Kyle Krabs, Joe Marino, both of their big boards were on there a year ago, as well as mine from Deep Fried Drafts. So everybody. You can go there, simulate the drafts. And last year they even did it where, like, after each round or after each day, you could go in and simulate a team's draft to get a feel of what may be available in the next couple of days. So it was good stuff. And like I said, I can't recommend it enough as far as a tool for everybody to use during draft season. It's awesome stuff. And I want to thank Steve for joining me today. But that's going to do it for this edition of The Cheapest Meal presented by Deep Fried Draft. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at Deep Fried Draft. Find everything that I do at deepfrieddraft.com and more. Again, thanks Steve Shoup of Fanspeak for joining us today. Until next time, thanks everybody for listening.
At Outback Steakhouse, we live by Aussie rules. And Aussie rule number 1 is ensuring steak satisfaction every time. We offer the highest quality cuts of steak, seasoned and seared to perfection, with a secret blend of 17 herbs and spices and cooked just the way you want. So join us tonight in Mobile at 4017 Airport Boulevard. We're open daily for lunch at 11 a.m. Plan your visit at Outback.com. Aussie rules. At Outback Steakhouse, we live by Aussie rules. And Aussie rule number 1 is ensuring steak satisfaction every time. We offer the highest quality cuts of steak, seasoned and seared to perfection, with a secret blend of 17 herbs and spices and cooked just the way you want. So join us tonight in Mobile at 4017 Airport Boulevard. We're open daily for lunch at 11 a.m. Plan your visit at Outback.com. Aussie rules.